Not every wound is an accident, some are perfectly aimed. And the hardest truth? It wasn't a stranger. It was someone you trusted with your soul. You know, one of the most dangerous lies we whisper to ourselves, often to protect our own hearts, is that they didn't mean to hurt us. That it was just a slip, a moment of weakness, maybe just a careless word tossed out without thinking. But deep down, something in us knows better. We can feel the difference, can't we? There's a huge gap between someone making a mistake and someone making a move. Between innocent ignorance and deliberate intent. And you felt that difference, didn't you? They didn't just accidentally wander into your heart and trip over your trust. No, they walked in, eyes wide open, knowing exactly where they were stepping. They measured their words, they timed their actions, and in the end, they still chose to wound you not by mistake, but by decision. That's not confusion, that's not miscommunication. That is calculation. When that realization hits, it shakes you to your core, because it wasn't just anybody. It wasn't a passerby or someone you barely knew. It was someone you loved, someone you covered in prayer, someone you spoke up for, fought for, would have gone to the ends of the earth for. And they looked at all that love and still chose to break you, knowing exactly how deep the damage would go. The enemy? He doesn't always show up with horns and fire. Sometimes, he's disguised as loyalty. Sometimes, he wears the mask of family, of love, and when that knife slides into your back, it doesn't always feel like betrayal right away. No. First, it feels like confusion. Like your soul is asking, wait, did that really just happen? You wonder if you misunderstood, but you didn't. You didn't miss anything. You just didn't want to believe it. You wanted to hold on to the idea that they were better than that the person they used to be still existed, that your shared history somehow meant you were safe. But here's the truth. History doesn't guarantee honor. Time doesn't build trust. And some people, they don't change. They just get better at hiding who they really are. So when the mask finally drops, don't pretend you didn't see it. When someone makes it clear that they meant to harm you, don't excuse it away. Don't patch it up with false hope or soft lies. That pain you felt? That was real. That silence you sat in after they walked away? That was real too. That ache that kept you tossing in bed, questioning your worth, all of it was real. And the hardest part? They saw it. They saw exactly what they did to you. They saw the effect it had and they didn't even blink. They didn't call. They didn't check. And if they said, "I'm sorry," it wasn't because they were sorry for you. It was because they feared losing control over you. Don't let your compassion blind you. Don't let your empathy excuse what was intentional. Because some people don't just hurt you by accident. Some people aim. They don't strike in chaos. No, they wait. They observe. They study you like a map. They memorize your patterns, note your soft spots, dig through your past to find the places where you're still healing. And when the moment feels most vulnerable, most exposed, that's when they move. Not by chance, but with terrifying precision. And the most tragic part? You called it love. You named it friendship. You labeled it family. But real love doesn't aim for your wounds. Real love doesn't look for your weakness just to break you where you're already fragile. Real love holds, protects, shields even when you're at your lowest. True love doesn't twist the knife when you're already on your knees. And yet, how many of us keep unlocking the door for the very ones God already pulled us away from? How many times do we say, they didn't mean it, or maybe they were just going through something? Yes, grace is beautiful. Grace is powerful. But grace without wisdom? That's not mercy, that's a trap. Forgiveness is a command. But being foolish? That's a choice. Nowhere did God ask you to return your heart to the one who shattered it. He asked you to guard it, to protect it, to walk in truth, not denial. And the truth is plain. If someone hurt you on purpose, they're likely to do it again. Stop giving second chances to people who use the first one to tear you apart. Stop calling pain loyalty. Stop believing love is about how much you can endure. That's not love, that's survival. Instead, start measuring love by how much you're respected, by how much you're protected, by how much you're seen and valued. Because you deserve relationships that build you up, not those that crush your spirit and then blame you for bleeding. And yes, I know it's hard. Letting go can feel like defeat, like losing a piece of yourself. But listen, you're not losing, you're learning. You're not walking away from love, you're walking away from a lie. You're making room, sacred room for what God actually has for you. And sometimes, the only way to receive the right thing is to release the wrong one, no matter how familiar, how comfortable, or how long it's been with you. Don't water down your pain just to keep someone close. Don't shrink your truth because you're afraid of being alone. God never asked you to betray yourself in order to love someone else. If they damaged you with intention, that's not love. That's not a mistake. That's manipulation. That's control. That's darkness pretending to be light. And it's time not for revenge, not for drama, but for freedom. To call it what it is so you can break free. You see, forgiveness is one of the greatest gifts God has given us, not only for others, but for ourselves. When we forgive, we release the poison. We put down the heavy weight we've been carrying. We break the chains that have kept us bound to bitterness and pain. But hear this, clearly, forgiveness is not the same thing as access. Just because you forgive someone doesn't mean you hand them the key to your peace again. We've been told over and over to forgive, and that's right. But we forget the second part. Be wise. We've been led to believe that if we truly forgive someone, then we have to let them all the way back in. That we're supposed to act like nothing ever happened. Smile like the wound wasn't deep. Pretend that the betrayal never cracked something inside of us. That real forgiveness means reopening the same door, rebuilding the same trust, and restoring the same closeness they once had. But that's not forgiveness. That's forgetfulness. And there's a huge difference. God does call us to forgive, absolutely. But nowhere in His Word did He ask us to become blind to wisdom. He never said, let the wolf back into the sheepfold just because you've said a prayer for him. Some of the people you've forgiven in your heart were never meant to stay. Their role in your life ended in the wilderness. They are not part of your promised land. Because you deserve relationships that build you up, not those that crush your spirit and then blame you for bleeding. And yes, I know it's hard. Letting go can feel like defeat, like losing a piece of yourself. But listen, you're not losing, you're learning. You're not walking away from love, you're walking away from a lie. You're making room, sacred room for what God actually has for you. And sometimes, the only way to receive the right thing is to release the wrong one, no matter how familiar, how comfortable, or how long it's been with you. Don't water down your pain just to keep someone close. Don't shrink your truth because you're afraid of being alone. God never asked you to betray yourself in order to love someone else. If they damaged you with intention, that's not love. That's not a mistake. That's manipulation. That's control. That's darkness pretending to be light. And it's time not for revenge, not for drama, but for freedom. To call it what it is so you can break free. You see, forgiveness is one of the greatest gifts God has given us, not only for others, but for ourselves. When we forgive, we release the poison. We put down the heavy weight we've been carrying. We break the chains that have kept us bound to bitterness and pain. But hear this, clearly, forgiveness is not the same thing as access. Just because you forgive someone doesn't mean you hand them the key to your peace again. We've been told over and over to forgive, and that's right. But we forget the second part. Be wise. We've been led to believe that if we truly forgive someone, then we have to let them all the way back in. That we're supposed to act like nothing ever happened. Smile like the wound wasn't deep. Pretend that the betrayal never cracked something inside of us. That real forgiveness means reopening the same door, rebuilding the same trust, and restoring the same closeness they once had. But that's not forgiveness. That's forgetfulness. And there's a huge difference. God does call us to forgive, absolutely. But nowhere in His Word did He ask us to become blind to wisdom. He never said, let the wolf back into the sheepfold just because you've said a prayer for him. Some of the people you've forgiven in your heart were never meant to stay. Their role in your life ended in the wilderness. They are not part of your promised land. You can pray for someone from a distance. You can wish them well without welcoming them in. Love doesn't always mean proximity, and forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. You can carry love in your heart without carrying the weight of that person in your life. Love doesn't require access. Grace doesn't demand proximity. And God? He's not judging you for how many people you let in. He's watching how well you guard the door. People will question you. They'll say, "But didn't you forgive them?" And you can look them in the eye and say, "Yes, I forgave them. I just learned not to trust them again." That's not bitterness speaking. That's not revenge talking. That's called clarity. That's called wisdom born from wounds. Because the same God who told you to forgive also told you to guard your heart. And how can you guard what you keep handing over to people who've only proven they know how to break it? The world has a way of twisting forgiveness. It tells you that forgiving someone means welcoming them back, pretending like nothing ever happened, that everything should go back to normal. But you know better now. Forgiveness is between you and God, but access? That's between you and discernment. And if God is the one closing the door, don't you dare prop it open just because you feel guilty. He knows what you don't. He saw the whispers behind your back. He heard the intentions they never had the courage to say aloud. He knows the harm they plotted while smiling right into your face. And sometimes, His protection looks like isolation. Sometimes, His mercy feels like loneliness. But don't be fooled. That space, that silence, that ache in your chest when everyone disappears, it's not rejection. It's deliverance in disguise. You don't owe anyone access just because you've forgiven them. That's not arrogance. That's not holding a grudge. That's preservation. That's you honoring what God painfully, faithfully, lovingly restored in your soul. So bless them, release them, pray for them. But stop giving front row seats to people who clapped when you fell. Stop inviting old pain into places where God has already healed you. Stop handing the pen to people who once tried to erase the very story God is writing in your life. Because they didn't just hurt you in a moment of carelessness. No, it went far deeper than that. It wasn't a flare of anger. It wasn't a slip of emotion. It was deliberate. They studied you. They paid attention. They noticed your kindness, memorized your tone when you spoke from the heart. They watched what made your eyes light up, what made your voice go quiet, what made your heart open in trust. And with all that insight, all that closeness, they still chose to cause harm. That's what makes it so painful, isn't it? That's what makes it hard to wrap your head around. It wasn't just what they did, it was the awareness, the intent. They knew you. They knew the silent battles you were already fighting, and they still aimed for your wounds. They knew. They knew the pain you were still healing from the wounds you hadn't even fully spoken about yet. They saw your vulnerability in that moment, not as something to protect, but as something to exploit. And instead of covering your weakness with compassion, they used it against you. That's not immaturity. That's not someone who didn't know better. That's intention. And I want to tell you something today, clearly and without hesitation. It's okay to admit that. It's okay to name it for what it truly was, because pretending it was anything less only prolongs your pain. We've been taught, especially those of us with tender hearts, to soften the blow for them, even while we're the ones still bleeding. We search for reasons, for excuses, for any angle that might make their betrayal seem lighter. We say things like, they were going through something, or maybe I overreacted, or they didn't really mean it. But let me tell you the truth. When someone uses what they know about you to wound you, when someone weaponizes the very things you once trusted them with, that's not love. That's not even confusion. That's a weapon. Some of you gave your loyalty to people who only wanted leverage. You handed them your secrets thinking it was safe, but they saw them as ammunition. You shared your dreams, your heart's deepest desires, with people who were silently hoping you'd fall short, just so they could say they saw it coming. You thought they were listening because they cared. They were listening because they were calculating. They weren't trying to get closer to your heart. They were studying the cracks so they could break you exactly where it would hurt the most. And listen to me, you are not foolish for trusting. You are not weak for loving. You are not naive because you believe the best in them. That's not your shame to carry. That's not your guilt to wear. What they did was a reflection of them, not of you. The darkness they carried in their own hearts was never your responsibility. Don't let their choices redefine your identity. You were honest. You were genuine. You were pure in your intention. That's not something to regret. That's something to thank God for because you didn't let this world make you hard before that moment. You were still open enough to care. You were still brave enough to believe in love. And yes, they took advantage of that. Yes, they twisted it. But that doesn't mean your heart was in the wrong place. It means theirs was. Because some people know exactly what they're doing. They bait you with compliments. They cover their intentions with charm. They make promises with no intention of keeping a single one. And just when you finally let your guard down, they strike. And that's why it hurts so deeply, because on the surface, everything felt real. Maybe parts of it were real. But the pain? That didn't come from nowhere. That wasn't spontaneous. That wasn't a slip. It was selected. It was strategic. It was precise. And that's what makes it so hard to forget. But listen closely. God saw it even when you didn't. He saw the hidden manipulation behind their smiles. He saw the jealousy behind their compliments. He saw how they twisted your kindness, how they weaponized your goodness and used it against you. And while you were confused, questioning, second-guessing yourself, He was not. He allowed the truth to come to the surface, not to shatter you further, but to set you free. Because sometimes, we can't see clearly until it hurts us. Sometimes, it takes pain to jolt us awake. Sometimes, betrayal is the alarm clock we didn't know we needed. You thought you were in a safe space, but you were in a setup. You thought they were covering your back, but they were only waiting for the right moment to twist the knife deeper. That's not just wrong, that's evil. And yet you survived. You made it through. You're still breathing, still walking, still standing, and now, you see. You see who they really are. You see what they were doing behind the scenes. And more importantly, you see what God was protecting you from all along. You see, the enemy doesn't strike randomly. He's strategic. He uses people close to you. He moves through those you trust. He speaks through those who have access. Because betrayal doesn't come from strangers, it only works when it comes from the inside. But thank God today that what was meant to destroy you failed. What was designed to crush you woke something up inside you. What was supposed to break you built a fire in your soul that can't be extinguished. And maybe they thought you wouldn't recover. Maybe they thought their silence would break your spirit. Maybe they expected you to keep begging, to keep hoping, to keep waiting for them to return. But you didn't. You stopped. And you're still standing, still rising, and now you know better. So don't ignore what you've seen. Don't rewrite the story just to make it easier to swallow. If someone studied your soul and still chose to wound you, that's not someone who deserves another invitation. That's someone God chose to expose. Let the exposure be enough. Let the truth be enough. Let it open your eyes, not your door. Because there comes a point in your healing when the most godly thing you can do is walk away. Not in hate, not in bitterness, but in wisdom. You don't have to stay in a place where your soul is under constant attack. You don't have to keep showing up in rooms where you're tolerated but never treasured. There is a strength in walking away that many people won't understand. It takes courage. It takes obedience. It takes a heart that finally looks at pain in the face and says, "No more. Not like this." See, the enemy would love nothing more than to keep you stuck in a cycle that wears down your soul slowly, piece by piece. A cycle of pain that looks like love. A cycle of apologies that never come with change. of promises that were spoken just to keep you around, never to be kept. He wants you to believe that staying even when your heart is breaking is noble, that sacrificing your peace is what love is supposed to look like. But true love doesn't cost you your sanity. Love doesn't ask you to shrink to be accepted. Love doesn't break you just so someone else can feel whole. Love builds, love protects, love brings clarity, not confusion. And sometimes, listen closely, loving yourself and honoring the presence of God in your life means turning your back on the very people who consistently took you for granted. You see, some people know you're valuable. They see your light. They just hope you never realize it. Because the moment you recognize your worth is the moment they lose control. They drain your spirit. Not because they hate you, but because they fear what you might become if you ever stop depending on their approval. So they keep you small. They smile to your face while slowly squeezing the life out of your confidence. They call you too sensitive when you finally speak up. They label you selfish the moment you set a boundary. But they never acknowledge the damage they've done, especially the damage done behind closed doors. And yet, you stayed. You stayed because you hoped they'd one day see your heart. You stayed thinking your loyalty would eventually soften them. You stayed believing that if you just loved harder, prayed more fervently, gave a little more of yourself, things would finally change. But there comes a moment, a holy moment, when your eyes open and you begin to see what God has been showing you all along. And that healing you're hoping for? It's not in staying. It's in leaving. Let me speak something true to your heart. Walking away doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've grown. It means you've seen enough. It means you finally realize that begging for crumbs at a table where God never pulled out a chair for you is not your calling. It means you're done trying to convince someone to value what they were meant to protect. That's not pride. That's clarity. And yes, it will hurt. Walking away always does. You'll grieve what you thought it could be. You'll feel the weight of everything you gave, everything you hoped for. But that pain, it's temporary. It's the sting of release. And just on the other side of that pain is peace. Not the kind of peace that depends on their mood or their apology, but the kind that lets you breathe without walking on eggshells. The kind that comes when you finally listen to the whisper of the Holy Spirit saying, "It's time." Some of you have been crying out to God for peace, and He's been answering you. He's been giving you signs. He's been revealing their fruit. He's been exposing their heart. He's been letting it fall apart not to punish you, but to wake you up. And every time you try to piece it back together, every time you justify their behavior, every time you pretend like it didn't really happen the way it did, you delay your deliverance. You've been shedding tears over people God has already removed His hand from. You've been praying, pleading, and begging for restoration, but heaven already closed that chapter. And every time you try to force it open again, you end up bleeding from the very pages God never intended you to reread. Because not every relationship is meant to be revived. Not every door that shuts is meant to be reopened. Sometimes, the blessing is in the ending. Sometimes, the healing begins only after the goodbye. And don't let guilt lie to you. Don't let shame convince you to stay in a place where you're being slowly broken. You do not owe anyone your peace of mind. You do not owe anyone your sanity, especially not those who shattered it in the first place. You don't owe access to the healed version of you, to the very people who wounded the earlier one. If they couldn't love you when you were giving them everything, they don't deserve to witness you now that you've found your strength. Let them be shocked. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence they created. Let them wrestle with the emptiness they once filled with their neglect. Because sometimes, your absence says what your words never could. And your peace, that stillness in your soul, will speak louder than any explanation you could ever give. And trust this, the same God who stood beside you in the valley, He's the same God who will walk with you as you step out of it. You are not walking away alone. You're walking with purpose. You're walking with protection. You're walking into a promise, one that cannot be fulfilled in the presence of pain. And don't forget this. Forgiveness is not the same as access. It's so easy to confuse the two, especially when your heart is tender and still full of hope, but they are not the same. You can forgive someone completely. You can pray for them with sincerity. You can release the bitterness, wish them well, and even thank God for what you've learned. And still, you can know deep in your spirit that they no longer have a place in your life. That's not unforgiveness, that's not bitterness. That's wisdom. Some of us were raised to believe that true forgiveness means going back. That if you really let it go, you'll reopen the door, welcome them in, and pretend like nothing ever happened. But that's not what forgiveness looks like when you're walking with God. Forgiveness means you let go of the weight of offense. You no longer carry the anger. You no longer feel the need for revenge. You no longer need them to suffer so you can heal. But forgiveness also means something else, something we don't talk about enough. It means you protect the space God has given you. It means you don't hand your peace back to the same person who once shattered it like it was nothing. Because here's the hard truth. Some people don't apologize because they've changed. They apologize because they see you have. They feel the silence. They sense the shift. They notice that you're not chasing, not answering, not bending anymore. And suddenly they want to come back, but not to honor your healing, to interrupt it. That's where discernment becomes your shield. That's where your healing needs boundaries. Because forgiveness, that's free. But access, that's earned. You don't owe anyone a second chance just because you chose to forgive. Forgiveness is a gift you give to protect your freedom. Access is a boundary you create to protect your peace. And if someone intentionally hurt your heart, if they shattered your trust, played games with your sincerity, and knew exactly what they were doing, then it is not your job to offer them a platform to do it again. Yes, God calls us to forgive, but He never called us to be foolish. He never asked us to keep the gate wide open for those who walk in, only to burn down what they never helped build. You can bless someone from a distance. You can pray for them without letting them into your inner circle. You can hope for their healing while still choosing separation. Because some people weren't just part of a painful season. They were a warning. And the lesson you learned? That's not meant to be forgotten, it's meant to protect your future. If you let someone back in without true repentance, without fruit, without change, that's not grace, that's self-betrayal. Forgiveness says, I don't hate you anymore. But wisdom says, I still don't trust you. And the beautiful thing? Both can live in the same healed heart. Both can walk hand in hand when you realize that grace does not mean gullibility. You can be filled with mercy and still guard your soul like a fortress. There are people out there who know exactly how to say the right things. They know how to sound remorseful, but it's not repentance. It's not transformation, it's rehearsal. They're not changing, they're performing. They're rehearsing the words that will pull you back into the door you just closed. And if you open it too soon, if you confuse emotional manipulation with spiritual change, you'll find yourself right back in the same pit God just pulled you out of. That's why Jesus said, "Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves." It's absolutely possible to be loving and discerning, to be kind and cautious, to be merciful and guarded. That's not cold, that's not bitter. That's called being a good steward of your soul. Because make no mistake, the enemy would love for you to confuse forgiveness with passivity. He'd love for you to believe that to forgive is to forget everything God just revealed. But wisdom says, not this time. But the Spirit of God, He teaches you something deeper. He teaches you how to forgive without surrendering the boundaries that keep your soul safe. Listen closely. The person who broke you, they don't get to define your new season. Just because they say they're sorry doesn't mean they're safe. Just because they show guilt doesn't mean they've changed. You have to look for fruit. You have to watch for humility. You have to see transformation, not just hear apologies. Because true repentance isn't loud. It doesn't just cry, it corrects. It doesn't just feel bad, it turns around and walks differently. So until you see consistent, tangible change, not just words, not just tears, not just regret they can stay outside the gates of your peace, you can still forgive them from a distance. Through prayer, through grace. But access is something entirely different. Forgiveness is how you set yourself free from what they did. But access is about who you're becoming now. It's about the space God is building in your life for something holy, something whole. And that means you don't have to keep reopening old doors just because someone knocks. You don't owe anyone another explanation. You don't need to relive pain just to prove you've forgiven it. If they come knocking on the same door they once slammed in your face, you have every right to smile with grace, forgive with sincerity, and still say, "No, not this time. God is doing something new in me." And let me tell you, there is nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in guarding your growth. There's no guilt in protecting your purpose. If they truly cared for you, they wouldn't have damaged you in the first place. And if they respected you, they would never dare to ask to come back through a door they once set on fire. There is power in letting go. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Some people cannot go with you where God is taking you next. Their chapter is over, and trying to drag them into your next season is like trying to fit broken glass into a new window. It might look familiar, but it's sharp, it's unstable, and under pressure it will shatter again. You see, there comes a moment when you stop hoping they'll finally see your worth, and you start walking like you already know it. That's not pride. That's healing. That's not arrogance. That's awareness. You cannot keep pausing your purpose to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You cannot keep begging someone to treat you right when they had every opportunity and still chose to break you. At some point, you stop answering the phone. You stop waiting for the apology that will never come. You stop checking for signs they've changed. And instead you look up and say, "Lord, I trust you with what's behind me, and I'm ready for what's ahead." And no, it's not easy, but it is right. It hurts, doesn't it? To let go of someone you once prayed for. To release the very person you imagined would be part of your forever. There's a unique sting in saying goodbye to someone who felt like home. But the truth is, not everyone is assigned to your destiny. Some people were only meant to walk with you for a season. And when that season ends, it's not your job to carry them into your future, no matter how much you hope they'd be there. It's your job to obey God even when it feels like loss. Even when your heart doesn't understand it yet. Because the enemy, he wants you stuck. Stuck in the memories. Stuck replaying old conversations. Stuck rereading the silences between the texts that never came. Why? Because as long as you're looking back, you're not moving forward. As long as you're clinging to what hurt you, you're not reaching for what heals you. And the enemy knows if he can keep your heart trapped in yesterday, you'll miss the blessing that's standing right in front of you today. But hear this, God is calling you higher. And sometimes, elevation requires separation. You can't climb while dragging what's already fallen. You can't rise while holding hands with someone who's determined to stay on the ground. You have to trust that letting go isn't just about walking away, it's about making room. Room for peace. Room for clarity. Room for the people who are sent by God, not sent by confusion and chaos. You gave them grace. You gave them time. You gave them chances. You gave them loyalty. And in return, they gave you wounds. They gave you silence. They gave you disappointment dressed as love. At some point, love means closing the door. Not because you're cruel, but because you're finally being kind to yourself. It's not weakness to walk away from dysfunction. It's wisdom. It's not bitterness to stop reaching for someone who repeatedly hurt you. It's self-respect. And it's not unforgiveness to protect your heart from further damage. It's discernment. You cannot heal in the same place that broke you. You cannot grow in the same soil that tried to choke the life out of you. And you cannot keep inviting back the people who only ever came to steal your joy. God doesn't need you to prove your worth to those who are blind to it. He doesn't need you to chase after people who already made their choice. What He needs is your heart surrendered, open, trusting. And hear this truth in the deepest part of your soul. Just because they let you go doesn't mean you weren't worthy. Just because they walked away doesn't mean you weren't enough. Their actions were never a reflection of your value. Their betrayal didn't subtract from your purpose. Their silence doesn't cancel your calling. When people mishandle you, that's on them, not on you. You are still chosen. You are still anointed. You are still called for greater things. Letting go is not the end, it's the beginning. It's the moment you stop surviving and start living. It's the day you take your peace back. It's the hour you look in the mirror and remember who you are in Christ. And from that moment forward, you stop accepting less than what you deserve. You stop settling for halfway love or temporary loyalty. You stop leaving spaces open for people who walked away without looking back. You walk forward, maybe trembling, maybe scarred, but you walk free. Because when God heals you, He doesn't just patch you up. He gives you a new heart, a new strength, and a new joy. And when He restores you, it's not just to replace what you lost, it's to prepare you for what's ahead. So leave that door closed. Let the silence remain silent. Let the past stay in the past. And don't you dare reopen what God already shut. The right people won't need to be chased. The ones God sends won't need to be convinced. And the life He's prepared for you, it doesn't require you to carry the people who tried to destroy it. Let go and walk forward in freedom.